Hey guys, Foxdrop here. Today I'm doing a video covering the rework to the jungle that's going to be coming through with us in Season 7 next season. Yes, the jungle is getting a rework. Again. So there's going to be a few changes. Hopefully what Riot is suggesting here is not as much is going to change as what's happened in the past with jungle reworks. It's not going to be a huge amount going through, but there's still some significant changes, definitely a lot to talk about. So let's just jump right into it. And first things first, I will skim through some of this because obviously I'm not just going to read it. It's going to take like 10 years if I do that. I'll put a link to it down below in the description if you want to take a look at it yourself. But basically, I'll summarize what it's saying, what the changes are going to be, and then after it, I will go through it and just kind of give my personal opinions on the stuff that Riot said. So essentially, the first thing the Riot have said is that they want the jungle to feel more like proper, decisive decision-making. That might be a bit of a redundancy, but they want it to feel a bit more strategic so that whenever you do certain camps or whatever you're doing as a jungler, you're really doing it with more a strategy in mind. They want to introduce these things called plants, which is going to sound a bit weird to begin with, which just put little contestable points in the jungle. At least that's the intent, right? Of right here is that they want these plants to spawn, which will be, we'll get into more detail of what they are a bit later on, but they're just adding these little bits of strategic diversity so that, you know, like a plant will spawn or you'll see it's about to spawn and then you'll be like, okay, I want to go contest this, you know, something like that. That's kind of what they want to introduce with plants. On top of that as well, they're changing smite buffs. So your smite buffs are now gone. You don't have the chicken buff, the wolf buff, the crow buff, whatever. That's all gone. That's not going to be in the game anymore. They felt like the wording here is they say that they didn't think this was a good system anymore because where is it? They say that over time players broke into two groups: those who have basically soul smiting and those who haven't. So essentially they're saying that, you know, that's why they didn't want to they wanted to get rid of smite buffs. In addition to the fact that they're introducing plants as well, they didn't really feel like they work together too well. Also, they're going to be changing jungle camps a little bit too, but there's no details on what that's going to be. And so they'll be releasing more information on that, which, depending on how it goes down, could be kind of spicy. So the plants that they're introducing into the game, what plants will do is they'll spawn randomly in the jungle, somewhat randomly. Like, they can spawn in different places, but it's kind of like Riot has limited the places they can spawn, but they will spawn somewhat randomly, and the type of plants it will be somewhat random as well. So this is the first type of plant. It's called a blast cone. You walk up to it, you smack it around the mouth, boom. It knocks everyone away. It's like a zig satchel. The second type of plant here is called the honey fruit. You walk up to it, you smack it around the mouth, boom, it spawns. Apparently it's not going to be oranges in the final release, but basically it spawns things that you can eat and restore your health. And then the last plant here is called the scry's bloom. You walk up to it, you smack it around the mouth, boom, and then it just pushes out a wave of vision which you can see into the distance. Also apparently it reveals wards as well. So those are the plants in the game. And that's what's going down. I'll put a link to this stuff in the description, boys and girls. If you want to read this for yourself, there's a lot of detail here. It will, you know, if you've got any questions, chances are if you read this post, your questions will be answered. But basically, what do I think about these changes? Well, before I say that, summary is that smite buffs are now gone. Jungle camps are getting a bit of a change. Jungle camps apparently are being tuned down as well, so that, for example, like your Krug buff is no longer there, your Grunt buff is no longer there. Things that helped you clear. The jungle is being tuned a little bit to make up for the lack of those things. Your smite has a slightly longer cooldown as well now, but also they're introducing a factor with smite where if you smite a jungle monster, you get the red buff heal or something very similar to the red buff heal as well, so that you don't, you just always get healed when you use your smite on a jungle camp now. And also these plants are being introduced as well. So what do I think about this bloody changes? This bloody changes wasn't even in good English, but whatever. What do I think about that? That's how crazy these things are. I can't even speak English anymore. What do I think about these changes? Well, firstly, I kind of just want to run down some of Riot's arguments because I really don't agree with some of the logic behind these changes. I mean, yeah, just some of the stuff for me just raises my eyebrow a little bit. This is what I was like sitting there reading this, like, okay. So the first thing I don't really agree with is this statement here, where they say over time players broke into two groups: those who have basically solved smiting and those who haven't, in reference to jungle smite buffs, why they don't like them. I don't necessarily think that's a great statement to have. I don't think it's a good argument to have, and I think that's an argument which you could have for like literally anything ever. You know, I mean, you could say that about harassing when you're laning, right? So if you go in for a last hit and the enemy laner harasses you, wait, no, we don't want that anymore. You're now going to be invincible whenever you go for a last hit, because basically players came into two groups: those people who understood lane mechanics and how to harass people when they went in for a last hit, and those people who didn't, people who'd solved laning, so to speak. So, it just seems like a really weird argument to make. And honestly, the smite buffs were pretty strategic in my personal opinion. This implies that there wasn't any strategy behind it. It was just... Hello, Shed. It was just people who, learned what smite buffs were good, what ones weren't, and then just went through it like that. Shed, I think he sneezed in his sleep and fell off the bed. Poor little dog. Which I disagree with. The wolf spirit was a really good smite buff, but not something you would take all the time. Just something if you felt like you lost control of that side of the jungle, you take the wolf spirit, or you're invading, you take the wolf spirit. Also, there's so yeah, I don't really agree with that. Also, here they talk about there was too much of a trade-off between people who ran the PvP smites and people who wanted to then actually smite objectives or get the smite buffs. And it's like, well, yeah, if you're running a PvP smite, if you've got red smite or blue smite, for example, and you're thinking, oh, but now I can't smite the chickens and then smite dragon after the team fight as well. It's like, well, yeah, that in my opinion, that is the point of the PvP smites. There's trade-off. Like if you're running around smiting enemy players, you're gonna have to think about, if I use my smite on this jungle camp and therefore have a better clear, I'm not going to be able to use it on this player here. So that's the trade-off of going for a PvP smite, is that your PvE is weaker. For me, that seems like a fair thing. It didn't seem like a bad thing necessarily. So I didn't really agree with that logic right there. Also, a point they make here about jungle camps is that they say jungle optimization is an interesting skill, but right now one of the strongest routes is just going straight through the jungle in order. Basically, they're saying if you start a Gromp, you go Gromp, wolves, chickens, Krugs. Just it doesn't you don't really think about what camps you're going to take. You just run through the jungle and clear it. Now, as long as gold and experience is in the game, that's not going to change. As long as junglers need gold and experience, that is not going to change. Of course, you're just going to run through the camp. It's the most optimal way for you to be clearing the jungle is just to take the things that are closest to you and work your way through the jungle. Of course, you're going to do that. So unless they introduce something into the game where it's worth just skipping all your camps and going to something very specifically strategic, then that's not going to change. And I really don't think they would introduce something like that. I just don't think that would work, because then what happens, maybe it'll be worth running far to get this specific camp that has some more strategic value, but then what happens if you can just put that camp, that big camp in right at the beginning of your jungle clear, and then just power through the jungle afterwards, so you don't actually have to run far to it at all. You just use it as the start of your jungle clear. I just feel like that's going to be really hard to balance and not something that's going to happen. So I don't really agree with that logic right there. But we don't know what the camp changes are going to be like, so we can't really talk too much about that right now. But the plants, yeah, what the hell is going on with this? Now, my biggest problem with the plants here is that there's more RNG into the game. RNG is not a good thing, really. The dragon is a good example of this. The elemental dragons, they're not bad. The thing is that the elemental dragons, either some dragon types are stronger than the other dragon types, and therefore that's bad, or that all the dragon types are the same, and therefore that's kind of bad as well. I'll explain why now. Hello, Shad. So if some dragon types are stronger than the other ones, then that does introduce more strategic diversity, in the sense that, if a shitty dragon has spawned, we're not going to take it, or we're not going to prioritize it as much as an objective, because it's not that good. Therefore, your strategy as a team will change depending on what dragons have spawned. That's kind of good, but at the same time kind of bad, because it's all RNG, whether or not you get a good dragon or not is just completely outside your control, and you can snowball a game crazily if you get really good dragons, that kind of thing. Or, go on, Shelly. Equally, in my opinion, equally bad is if the alternative here is kind of what we have right now, where all the dragons are the same, in which case there is no strategic element decision making going into whether or not you're taking a certain dragon, because it's the dragons are all equally valuable, we may as well just take, if it's up, you're let's take dragon. You don't think about what type of dragon it is that is spawned, and therefore, let's take this dragon because it's a really good dragon. Well, all the dragons are the same, so it's just dragon spawn, let's take it. It doesn't really add strategy in it at all, really. So RNG is not necessarily a good thing, and because you don't know what dragons are going to be spawning before the game starts. It's not like you can draft a specific team comp around what dragons are spawning. Like if loads of mountain dragons are spawning, and therefore you have like you can draft things that take away objectives really fast, or if loads of ocean dragons are spawning, you can draft a really heavy like siege or poke comp. You can't do that. Like the siege and poke comps are stronger with like the ocean dragon, which will give you like good regen, so you can continuously poke without leaving. But it's not like you need them to make the siege and poke comps work. And no one will draft a comp around the off chance that you're going to get a lot of ocean dragons, because what if you don't? You're screwed. So RNG isn't necessarily a good thing in my personal opinion. And also, like it's kind of a similar thing with these plants where they spawn a bit randomly. Like I don't really feel like it's going to add too much to the game. And something which I really just at a very fundamental level here is these plants don't even seem that. Like, what's the point? And this blast cone specifically, who the hell is going to contest this blast cone? Like, if it's there, it's there. It's kind of interesting, but it's not like something you're going to really, oh crap, a blast cone is spawning. Let me rush to secure it. It doesn't do anything. Like, it's like, yes, if there's a fight around the blast cone, it's going to influence the fight. I can imagine that. And in this very niche specific example that Riot put up where Jace is running from graves, it's useful. Yeah, sure. But as not an objective, it's just a thing that's there. Like I'm really struggling to see how this adds any strategy into the game. It doesn't really. Like maybe you could argue that Jace specifically chose to run away this way because he thought he could run into a bloody plant, a blast cone. But this does not scream strategy to me. It just screams like, well, that's there, that's cool. The other ones are slightly more strategic, but even then it's a little bit weird. Like they said that these plants will be spawning, the second rotation of these plants will be spawning as lane phase is ending. So they're not going to be spawning quite a lot. And now it's like, I don't know for sure. They haven't given immense amounts of details with this about whether or not like all three plants will be up at one time, whether it's just one plant spawning and then, that kind of thing. We don't really know exactly how it is, but either way, like say at max you're going to get 2 of these honey fruits before lane phase ends, which is when these honey fruits are most valuable. Apparently, these honey fruits heal you based on how much health you're missing as well. So the lower health you are, the more they heal you. And the max heal you'll get is something around 30% of your health if you're on really, really, like 1 health. So it's not that much of a heal either. It's like a health pack in bloody Aram or something. Seems like a weird objective to kind of contest. Because it doesn't feel like something you would contest, because it's like, I only need this if I'm like low-ish on health. Which is something which just kind of happens, and then it's like, oh, I'm lowish on health now. Like maybe I did a gank and it was a counter gank, it was a 2v2, I lost a bit of health. I'm now gonna take the honey fruit, whatever the bloody hell it's called. It's not like, oh shit, a honey fruit spawned, I'm gonna go secure that. Oh wait, no, because I'm on full health, I don't need it. It seems like like things that just pop up in the situation, and like, oh, this could be useful. Scry's Bloom is like the only one in my personal opinion which seems like more like something you would contest if nothing else to deny it from the enemy team. But even then, its value seems like a little bit weird. Like it's like it seems like something. If you could shoot it through the jungle and then you could spot out the enemy jungler, that seems like it would be quite cool. Honestly, I think that's kind of cool. I think maybe you would contest that. But outside of that, like this example is a pretty bad example in my opinion, because if you think the enemy team is doing dragon, then surely the enemy team would have stomped this before they started dragon. Like if you're doing an objective and you know that this bloody Scry's Bloom is up, you take it before you start doing dragon. It doesn't seem like something you're like, oh crap, a Scry's Bloom has spawned, let's take it. It like, it really doesn't seem, especially if it's in like the enemy jungle and it's something you want to contest. Then if you're going that far into the enemy jungle anyway, you just bring a ward and boom. Like if you're going that deep into the enemy jungle and you've got a ward on you, you'd ward up and you'd sort it anyway. So that's kind of what I want to say, honestly, because I've been talking for quite a while here. But that's just my opinion. I don't really think that what Riot have said about these things really lines up with how I feel like the things are in practice. Like I don't necessarily agree with some of the logic specifically about the smite buffs, and I think the plants don't really add any kind of strategy. I don't think there's much strategy around the plants at all. Then again, I could be completely wrong. Just my personal opinion. I'm reading these words on a screen. So that's all I want to say for this video, boys and girls. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to give me that thumbs up and subscribe to me for education, all that other business. Thanks for watching, boys and girls. Have a wonderful evening, day, night, whatever it is where you're from, and I will see you in my next video.